My name is Leora Vance. Before I became Leora Croft, I was a girl from the Blue Ridge Mountains, raised on the scent of pine and the deep, abiding silence of the ancient hills. My father taught me to identify birds by their song, and my mother taught me the patient art of mending what was broken: quilts, book spines, hearts. I found my calling in that quiet patience, becoming an archivist, a keeper of stories held in the delicate fibers of old paper and the faded ink of forgotten letters. I believed in the gentle order of things, in the truth that history, if we listen, can teach us how to live. I suppose that's why I was so unprepared for Julian. I met him in Savannah, a city that felt like a living archive itself, with its cobblestone squares and veils of Spanish moss that held the secrets of centuries. I had moved there for a position at the Georgia Historical Society, my small apartment a haven of books and brewed tea. Julian Croft was an architect, a sculptor of glass and steel who was making a name for himself with structures that seemed to defy gravity. He was brilliant, charming, and saw in me, I think, a kind of serene anchor to his soaring ambition. He loved the story of me, the quiet mountain girl who curated the past. I fell in love with the future he promised, a life as grand and beautifully designed as one of his buildings. We married under the sprawling limbs of a live oak in Forsyth Park. We bought a restored Victorian home in Ardsley Park, its wide porch and heart pine floors a testament to a grace I thought we could inhabit. For a time, it was beautiful. Our life was a carefully curated collection of dinner parties with his colleagues from Ascend Design Group, charity galas at the Telfair Museum, and weekends spent sailing along the Intracoastal Waterway. I learned to navigate his world, to be the poised, supportive wife he needed. But an archive, I know, is not just a collection of beautiful things. It is also a record of decay, of slow, inexorable loss. The first fraying thread appeared so subtly I almost missed it. We were at a garden party, the air thick with the sweet perfume of jasmine. He draped an arm over my shoulders, his touch of familiar comfort, and leaned in to whisper to a client. "Leora keeps me grounded," he said with a fond smile. Then, a little louder, for the benefit of the group, if she didn't, I might just float away and leave her behind. "You have to keep a tight rein on artists, you know." Everyone chuckled, a polite ripple of amusement. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach, a strange dissonance between the warmth of his arm and the chill of his words. It was a joke, of course. Just Julian's way. But the jokes became a pattern, tiny, corrosive drops of water on stone. "That dress is lovely, darling," he might say as I was getting ready for an evening out, his eyes scanning me with an appraiser's clinical gaze. Perhaps a bit declarative for a simple dinner, though, don't you think? The dress, a soft blue linen I adored, would go back into the closet, and I would choose something more muted, less declarative. My own voice began to feel the same way, too loud, too much. I started editing my stories at his parties, sanding down the edges of my opinions until they were smooth and unremarkable, easily fitting into the spaces he left for me. He never raised his voice. He never had to. His power was in the quiet architecture of our life, in the unspoken rules I learned to obey. Control, for Julian, was not about force, it was about design. He would gently rearrange the books I had just shelved, explaining that his system was more aesthetically logical. He would finish my sentences in conversations, clarifying my point with a brilliant smile that made me feel slow-witted and clumsy. He was building a world, and I was becoming a perfectly placed, silent piece of furniture within it. My dearest friend, Clara, a family law attorney with eyes that missed nothing, saw the erosion long before I was willing to admit it. We had known each other since my first week in Savannah, bonding over a shared love for historical novels and overpriced lattes. "He talks about you like you're a prized possession he's afraid will tarnish," she said one afternoon as we sat on a bench in Chippewa Square. A flock of pigeons scattered as a trolley rumbled by. "He's proud of me, Clara," I'd insisted, the words tasting like a lie on my tongue. "He just has a very specific vision for things." "And you? What about your vision, Leora?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. "I feel like I see less of it every time we meet." You're starting to look like a beautiful, fading photograph. I brushed it off, but her words stayed with me, another entry in a silent, internal archive of hurts I was too afraid to open. My world, once expansive and filled with the quiet rustle of history, began to shrink. It became the precise dimensions of our home in Ardsley Park, its boundaries defined by Julian's moods, his expectations, his presence. When my parents came to visit from North Carolina, he was the perfect host, but I felt his eyes on me constantly, a low-grade hum of scrutiny. He later commented on how my mountain accent became more pronounced around them, a casual observation that felt like a critique. He was sanding me down, bit by bit, and I was letting him. I told myself this was the compromise of marriage. He was a good provider. He was respected. He didn't have a temper. These were the things I counted, like beads on a rosary, to ward off the truth. The moment of clarity, when it finally came, was not a dramatic shattering but a quiet, chilling snap. It happened at the Ascend Design Group's annual awards gala, held in the grand atrium of the Jepson Center for the Arts. The space, one of Julian's own designs, was magnificent, all soaring white walls and light. We were 2 glasses of champagne deep when a senior partner, Mr. Abernathy, paused to congratulate Julian on a new commission. "You've got the Midas touch, Croft," Abernathy said, clapping him on the back. "And a lovely wife to keep you humble." After he walked away, Julian turned to me, his smile gone, his eyes holding a familiar, cool contempt. "Humble," he sneered under his breath, "just for me. As if. You're all the same, you know. Always wanting something. A bigger house, a better life. So needy." The word hung in the air between us, invisible but dense. Needy. Me, the woman who had asked for nothing but his love, who had slowly given away pieces of herself to fit into his life. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. My face burned with a shame that was becoming a second skin. I didn't say a word. I had forgotten how. That night, at home, he poured himself a whiskey, the clink of the ice against the crystal glass unnaturally loud in the silent house. He didn't speak of the incident, but it filled the space between us. I watched him, the handsome stranger in my living room, and felt a profound sense of loneliness. I moved toward him, my steps measured, my heart a trapped bird against my ribs. My voice, when I found it, was steady. "You know, Julian," I began, my tone soft, conciliatory. "You joke sometimes about things ending. About leaving." He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, a smirk playing on his lips. "It keeps you on your toes, doesn't it?" "Maybe," I said, a sudden, wild courage rising in me. "Maybe we should have something in writing. A post-nup. Just to make the joke official." He threw his head back and laughed, a genuine, booming sound that echoed off the high ceilings. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated arrogance. "A post-nup? Darling, what assets are you worried about? Your collection of first editions? My piddling little investment in that Innovatech startup?" He had put about $10,000 into a friend's tech venture a year ago, an amount he considered play money. He set his drink down on a thick, cardstock coaster from the Perch, the rooftop bar where we'd been the week before. With a flourish, he pulled a fountain pen from his jacket, the same one he used to sign million-dollar contracts. "Here," he said, his eyes glinting with amusement. He scribbled on the coaster, "In the event of our separation, Leora Croft receives 80% of my Innovatech Solutions holdings and full ownership of the Ardsley Park residence. This is my gift to her, freely given." He signed his name with a dramatic, looping signature and dated it. "There. Take your little security blanket. Go on, get it notarized if it makes you feel better." He downed the rest of his whiskey and was asleep on the sofa minutes later. He would not remember this conversation in the morning. He would dismiss it as drunken nonsense if he did. But I stood there, looking at the coaster in my hand, the ink still gleaming under the lamplight. It wasn't a security blanket. It was a key. The next day, I called Clara. I met her at her quiet office on Bull Street, the air smelling of old law books and fresh coffee. I handed her the coaster without a word. Her eyebrows shot up as she read it, her lawyerly composure momentarily slipping. "Leora, did he sign this willingly?" she asked, her voice low. I nodded, the knot in my throat too tight for speech. She leaned back in her leather chair, which groaned in protest. She looked from the coaster to my face, and I saw a decade of unspoken concern crystallize into resolve in her eyes. "All right," she said, her voice all business now. "This is an unorthodox instrument, but the intent is clear. Let's make it ironclad. We'll draft a formal post-nuptial agreement that references this as the precipitating document. We'll have a notary on standby. He gave you the pen, Leora. We're just going to make sure the ink is permanent." "I don't want to fight him, Clara," I whispered, my voice trembling. I want to feel safe." "I know," she said softly. "This isn't about fighting. This is about ensuring that if the day comes, you can walk away whole." And so, my quiet work began. I became an archivist of my own life. On a password-protected file on my personal laptop, I started a new collection, titled simply Chronology. It wasn't a diary filled with emotions, but a log of events, a meticulous record of the truth. October 14th, J. referred to my research as a cute hobby in front of the dean. Laughter from the table. November 2nd, returned from a weekend trip to find my office rearranged. J. explained it was more efficient. My project files were mislabeled. December 9th, J. came home late, smelling of a perfume that wasn't mine. Said he was working on the Adler pitch. His colleague confirmed the pitch was submitted last week. I scanned receipts I found in his pockets, a 2-night stay at the Perry Lane Hotel on a weekend he was supposedly at a conference in Atlanta. A dinner for 2 at the Grey on our anniversary, which he'd told me he had to miss because of a deadline. Each piece of evidence was a small, sharp stone I placed on a scale, weighing against the life I thought I had. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was simply doing what I had always done, gathering the facts, preserving the story, seeking the truth in the artifacts left behind. Something began to shift inside me. The fear that had been my constant companion started to recede, replaced by a cool, quiet resolve. I moved through my days with a newfound purpose that was entirely my own. I stopped shrinking. I started wearing my blue linen dress on a Tuesday. When Julian commented on it, I simply smiled and said, "I like it." The lack of a defensive reaction seemed to unnerve him more than any argument could have. He mistook my newfound calm for submission. He saw a wife who had finally accepted her place, who had been tamed. And with that belief, he grew careless. He'd leave his phone face up on the kitchen island. I'd see messages from a contact saved only as a pop-up. "Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again." I would feel a pang, not of jealousy, but of a strange, sad confirmation. I would take a mental note, a new entry for the chronology. It was in the spring, when the azaleas burst into a riot of pink and white all over the city, that I found out I was pregnant. I sat on the edge of the clawfoot tub in our bathroom, the positive test in my hand, and felt 2 opposing emotions crash over me like a wave, a fierce, protective love for the tiny life inside me, and a deep, chilling fear of bringing a child into the quiet, cold war of our home. That was the moment my purpose clarified. This was no longer just about me. It was about the future I would build for my child, a future of warmth and safety, free from the subtle poisons of contempt and control. My quiet preparations intensified. Clara and I finalized the post-nuptial agreement. It was an elegant, formidable document. It stipulated that in the event of a divorce initiated by Julian, the terms he had flippantly scribbled on the coaster would be enacted immediately. We even discovered that Innovatech Solutions had been quietly acquired by a major tech conglomerate, Viridian Dynamics. The piddling stock was now worth a significant sum, over $500,000. Julian, in his focus on his own grand designs, had paid no attention. The final piece of the archive fell into place 5 days before Christmas. The house was filled with the scent of pine from the towering Fraser fir in the living room and the gingerbread cookies I had just taken out of the oven. Julian and his best friend, Leo, a fellow architect and his most loyal sycophant, were in the living room, drinking bourbon and laughing. I was in the butler's pantry, arranging a silver tray with glasses and a pitcher of sweet tea, when I heard Leo's voice, low and conspiratorial. "Are you really going to do it? At the dinner table? In front of his family?" "It's perfect." Julian's voice was smug, laced with the smooth confidence of a man who believes he holds all the cards. "Theatrics are important, Leo. It's the final design. I'll serve her the papers with the dessert. I've even got a little bet going with the guys at the office that she'll cry." Leo chuckled. "Of course she'll cry. Women are so predictable. She'll absolutely crumble." "Exactly," Julian said, his voice light. "She'll fall to pieces. It's what they do." The silver tray grew heavy in my hands. The world seemed to tilt, the familiar pattern of the wallpaper swimming before my eyes. My feet were rooted to the floor, my breath caught in my chest. Crumble. Fall to pieces. He didn't see me. He saw a stereotype, a role in a play of his own making. He had no idea that I was no longer an actor in his production. I was the quiet archivist who had read the entire script, and I knew how it was going to end. I took a slow, steadying breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked into the living room with a serene smile, the tray held perfectly level. Christmas dinner was a masterpiece of curated warmth. The mahogany dining table, a family heirloom from Julian's grandmother, gleamed under the soft light of the chandelier. A garland of fresh cedar and magnolia leaves, which I had woven myself, ran down its center, studded with flickering white candles. Julian's parents were there, his mother, Eleanor, elegant in a silk blouse, his father, Robert, a retired judge, reserved and watchful. My own parents had driven down from the mountains, my mother's Tupperware of her famous pecan tosses sitting on the sideboard, my father looking slightly overwhelmed by the formal splendor of it all. Julian played the role of the magnanimous host to perfection. He carved the honey-glazed ham with a flourish, laughing and telling stories about his latest project. He wore a cashmere sweater the color of mulled wine, a gift from me the previous Christmas. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth, but I smiled. I moved between my guests, refilling wine glasses, offering more mashed potatoes, a ghost of a hostess in my own home. My heart wasn't racing with fear. It was beating with a slow, powerful cadence, a drumbeat counting down to the final act. He caught my eye as he set the carving knife down, and he gave me a small, conspiratorial wink, as if we were sharing a secret. We were, just not the one he thought. I returned his smile with one of my own, placid and unreadable. "To family," he said, raising his glass for a toast. "And to new beginnings in the new year." A chorus of here went around the table. I raised my glass of sparkling cider. "To new beginnings," I echoed softly. After the main course was cleared, a hush fell over the room. I saw Leo give Julian a subtle nod. Julian stood, tapping his fork against his crystal glass. "If I could have everyone's attention for a moment," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "Before we have dessert, I have one final Christmas gift. For my wife, Leora." My mother beamed at me, her eyes shining with affection. My father smiled, a proud, gentle expression on his face. Julian reached into the inner pocket of his blazer and produced a plain manila envelope. He walked around the table and placed it on the polished wood in front of me, next to my dessert fork. "Merry Christmas, darling," he said. Leo let out a little cough that sounded suspiciously like a suppressed laugh. A flicker of confusion crossed my mother's face. The envelope was stark and official, utterly out of place amidst the festive cheer. I looked at Julian. His face was a mask of feigned sympathy, but his eyes were alight with triumph. He was waiting for the performance to begin. He was waiting for the tears. I picked up the envelope. My hands were perfectly steady. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out the folded documents. The bold, black letters at the top were unmistakable: petition for dissolution of marriage. He had already signed it. He had even used a yellow highlighter on the section detailing the division of assets, a paltry sum, a calculated insult. I read it, then slowly lifted my gaze to meet his. He was watching me, his smile expectant. I gave him a small, genuine smile in return. "Thank you, Julian," I said, my voice clear and calm. The table was utterly silent. A frown flickered across his brow. This was not in his script. I reached into the small velvet clutch beside my chair and pulled out a simple, elegant fountain pen, my own. I uncapped it, signed my name in my neat, archivist script, dated it, and slid the papers back into the envelope. "There," I said, pushing it gently back toward him. "All done." My father was staring at me, his mouth slightly agape. Julian blinked, completely thrown. "That's it," he stammered, his composure beginning to crack. "That's it," I confirmed. "But I have a gift for you, too." I reached under the table and retrieved a slim, beautifully wrapped box tied with a gold satin ribbon. I placed it in the empty space where the envelope had been. It sat between his plate and his shattered expectations. "What is this?" he asked, his voice tight. "Your gift," I replied. His fingers fumbled with the ribbon. He tore the paper away to reveal a handsome leather-bound portfolio. He opened it. As his eyes scanned the first page, every trace of color drained from his face. His confident smirk dissolved into a slack-jawed mask of disbelief. He was reading the formal, notarized post-nuptial agreement. "What in God's name is this?" his father, the judge, asked, leaning forward. Julian couldn't speak. His lips moved, but no sound came out. So I answered for him. "That is the agreement Julian and I made almost a year ago," I explained to the stun table. "It outlines the terms of our separation, which, according to the document he just served me, he has now initiated." I turned my gaze back to my husband. "You gave me a gift that night, Julian. All I did was have it beautifully framed." "That stock, the Viridian deal," he whispered, his eyes wide with horror as the financial implications dawned on him. "Yes," I said. "The piddling little investment. It seems it did quite well." The silence in the room was a physical thing, thick and heavy. His mother, Eleanor, looked as if she might faint. But I wasn't finished. I reached into my clutch one last time and pulled out a small, square envelope. I slid it across the table. It came to a stop beside the portfolio. He stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside was a small, black and white photograph. A sonogram. He looked from the photo to my face, his expression a chaotic mix of shock, confusion, and a dawning, terrible understanding. "I'm pregnant, Julian," I said, my voice soft but unshakable. 10 weeks. You'll be a father in the new year." For a single, unguarded moment, a flicker of something wondrous crossed his face, the pure, instinctual joy of a man hearing he is to have a child. But it vanished as quickly as it came, extinguished by the cold reality of his own making. The post-nup. The divorce. The baby. The life he had so carefully designed had just spectacularly collapsed. You planned this," he finally choked out, the words a ragged accusation. I met his gaze, and for the first time in years, I felt no fear, no shame, only a deep, quiet strength. "No, Julian," I said. "You predicted I would crumble. You planned a performance. I simply prepared for my future. There's a difference." I picked up my water glass and took a slow, deliberate sip. His father, Robert, slowly took off his spectacles and began polishing them with a napkin, his face a grim, unreadable mask. My mother gently laid her hand on my arm, her touch a current of unconditional love. Julian pushed his chair back, the sound scraping harshly against the floor. He stared at me, his eyes searching for the woman he thought he knew, the one who would cry and beg and fall to pieces. She was gone. In her place was a stranger he had created, a woman forged in the fires of his own arrogance. He turned and fled the room, leaving the remnants of his life scattered on the gleaming mahogany table. A moment of stunned silence, and then my father cleared his throat. "Well," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he looked at me, his eyes shining with a pride that healed a part of me I didn't know was still broken. "I think this calls for those pecan tosses your mother brought." A watery chuckle went around the table. The tension broke, replaced by a new, uncertain reality. But as my mother passed me a small, sweet pastry, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was not crumbling. I was finally, truly, whole. The days that followed were wrapped in a quiet blanket of snow and silence. Julian did not return. He sent a curt email requesting to have his belongings packed and sent to his office. He did not mention the baby. He did not mention the life we had shared. It was as if he was trying to erase it all, to archive it away in a locked room in his memory. My parents stayed for a week, filling the house not with recriminations or anger, but with the gentle, steady rhythms of their love. My mother made soups and hummed old folk songs in the kitchen. My father sat with me by the fire, talking not of Julian, but of the constellations he would teach his grandchild, of the stories hidden in the winter stars. Their presence was a balm, a reminder of the bedrock of love that had been there all along, waiting for me to find my way back to it. Clara came over the day after they left, armed with a thermos of chamomile tea and a practical, reassuring presence. We sat on the living room floor, surrounded by boxes of Julian's things, expensive suits, architectural books, awards he'd won. "You know," she said, looking at a framed photo of us on our wedding day that I had taken down from the wall. "The law can divide assets, Leora. But it can't measure what he truly took from you. Or what you've managed to reclaim." "I don't feel like I won anything, Clara," I confessed, tracing the rim of my teacup. "I just feel quiet." "Quiet is good," she said, her smile warm. "Quiet is where you get to hear your own voice again." After his things were gone, the house felt cavernous, its silence echoing with memories. For a few days, I drifted through the rooms like a ghost. Then, one morning, I woke to the pale winter sun streaming through the windows and knew I could not live in his museum anymore. I had to build my own home. My work began not with a sledgehammer, but with a paint roller. I painted over the cool, gallery white walls with warm, buttery yellows and soft, misty blues, colors that reminded me of mountain sunrises. I sold the severe, modern furniture he had chosen and filled the rooms with pieces I found in Savannah's antique shops, a worn velvet armchair, a sturdy oak table, a rocking chair with a story in every scratch. I opened every window, letting the scent of damp earth and wisteria chase away the last traces of his expensive, sterile cologne. I was no longer curating a life for someone else. I was building one for myself, and for the child growing within me. The nursery became my sanctuary. I painted a mural of the Blue Ridge Mountains on one wall, their gentle, rolling peaks a promise of strength and endurance. I hung a mobile of hand-carved birds above the crib. I found a small, antique bookshelf and filled it with the stories I had loved as a child, their pages soft with age. This room was a declaration, a testament to the world I would create for my baby, a world of warmth, wonder, and unconditional love. As the months passed, a new rhythm took hold. My life, which had become so small and constrained, began to expand in quiet, meaningful ways. I reconnected with old friends. I started volunteering at a local literacy program, sharing my love of stories with children. I took long walks through the city's squares, no longer seeing them through the lens of Julian's architectural critiques, but with my own eyes, marveling at the resilience of the old oaks and the intricate beauty of the ironwork. I was rediscovering myself, the Leora who existed before Julian, the woman who found joy in the small, quiet details of the world. The first time I felt the baby kick, it was a flutter, as delicate as a bird's wing. I was in the garden, my hands deep in the cool, dark soil, planting lavender. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Then it came again, a definite, reassuring tap from within. I laughed, a real, unedited laugh that bubbled up from my soul. I laid a hand on my belly, a silent greeting to the little life who was my partner in this new beginning. "Hello, you," I whispered. "We're going to be all right." 6 months after that Christmas dinner, a letter arrived. The envelope was thick, expensive cream-colored cardstock, the address written in Julian's familiar, sharp handwriting. My heart gave a painful lurch. I set it on the kitchen table and let it sit there for a whole day, a silent testament to a life I had left behind. Finally, with a cup of tea for courage, I opened it. It was not a legal document. It was a letter. "Leora," it began. "I don't expect forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. The last few months have been a reckoning. I have lost my firm, my reputation, and the respect of everyone I care about. But the greatest loss, I realize now, was you. Not the wife I tried to shape, but the woman I first met, the one who spoke of history as if it were alive. I have been in therapy. I am trying to understand the man I became, the man who could be so cruel to the person he claimed to love. There are no excuses. I was arrogant, insecure, and profoundly lost. I know I have no right to ask for anything. But I am asking now. Not for a second chance, but for the chance to be a father. I want our child to know that his or her father is not the man he was, but a man who is trying, every day, to be better. I will abide by any conditions you set. I just want the chance to earn my place in our child's life. Julian." Tears streamed down my face as I read it. They were not the tears of a woman crumbling, but the tears of release, of a deep, sorrowful grief for the love we had lost, for the people we had been. I didn't know what the future held. Forgiveness felt like a distant country I wasn't yet ready to visit. But as I folded the letter, I knew that the story of us was not over. It was simply entering a new, more honest chapter. The path to reconciliation was long and uncertain, but for the sake of the child who connected us, it was a path I was willing to explore. A year to the day after that fateful Christmas, the house was filled with a different kind of warmth. The table was smaller, the gathering more intimate. My parents were there, Clara and her new husband, a few dear friends. The air smelled of roasted chicken and cinnamon, and the sound of laughter was real and effortless. In the corner, by the fire, sat the old rocking chair. And in my arms, sleeping soundly, was my daughter, Rowan, her tiny hand curled around my finger. She had Julian's dark, curly hair, but she had my eyes, and my heart, and my spirit. As the evening wound down, I sat in the rocker, gently swaying, watching the firelight dance on her peaceful face. The house was quiet, filled with the gentle breathing of my daughter and the steady, peaceful beat of my own heart. I thought of the woman I had been a year ago, the fearful, shrinking ghost in this very house. And I thought of the woman I was now. I had learned that strength isn't about winning, but about enduring. That self-respect is not a gift someone gives you, but a foundation you build for yourself, one small, brave choice at a time. And that the most beautiful lives are not the ones that are perfectly designed, but the ones that are lovingly, patiently, mended. Rowan stirred in her sleep, a tiny sigh escaping her lips. I leaned down and kissed her soft, warm forehead. The future with her father was still an unwritten page. But here, in this quiet moment, I felt a profound and unshakable peace. I was no longer just an archivist of other people's stories. I was finally, gratefully, the author of my own.